You're listening to the Really Very Crunchy podcast with your hosts, Emily
and Jason. So I had a big parenting fail today.
What happened?
I fired my child.
You did fire them, I remember, and then we had a
I didn't fire both of them. I threatened one.
No, you did.
Fired.
You said, say it one more time, and you're fired.
So we're trying to teach them some money management, figure out there's certain tasks you can, odd jobs you can do for money. You can come to us like to earn some money, right? And wanting to teach them nice working principles, okay? Mm-hmm. And, well, as our youngest comes in, this is a complete fail on my part. I told him, okay, you can pick up all the sticks in the yard.
You have unrealistic expectations for our 4-year-old and 6-year-old.
I just assume that they're tiny adults.
I keep telling you this. I keep telling you this. And then you keep doing it. And I don't know how to get the message through that they're babies. Look at their little legs. Mm-hmm. Like, look at how little their legs are.
Yeah.
So tiny.
Their little hands.
They're so little.
Yeah.
That's your expectations.
I looked at him and said, "You're fired." Well, okay. So he came in. I was just picking up sticks in the yard. I said, "Just pick up some sticks." What I did, they took it very literally, and we're picking up every tiny. We live in a very wooded place, but every tiny stick imaginable, and they were feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, I walked out there and felt overwhelmed.
And then our youngest, Alder, comes in and he's like, "I'm not doing this. Just pay me." It was like $5.
No, he comes up to the window and is like, "I'm done. I give up."
And I said, "You give up? That's fine. You're fired." I was joking. It was a joke.
Don't understand sarcasm.
It didn't go over very well, especially with our older one. He was very mad.
He understands being fired. So then he came in and he was like, "You can't
joke.
Fire him." And then you're like, "I'm firing him." And then he comes back at you. And then it was just this back and forth. And you were like, "Say it again and you're fired." And of course he said it again because
I was kidding.
Parenting 101. Don't get in a power struggle.
Don't fire your kids.
I'm just sitting there cringing because I don't want to undermine your authority as their father, but also sometimes I'm just like, what are you doing? What thought processes are going through your brain right now? I cannot understand. I do not get it. Stop.
Usually it's just like, is there any coffee left? That's my thought process through most of the day.
As you're telling your 6-year-old and 4-year-old that they're fired.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, man, we're out of coffee.
Well, You're fired. What's even worse is you fired them, but then you still paid them.
Yeah, well,
I mean, you did some reparations. You went out there.
I helped them. Yes,
and I showed them an appropriate size stick.
In helping them, I realized that
they're little.
They're tiny.
They're so tiny.
Little babies.
Yes, so little.
And that the joke of being fired is not age appropriate.
No. Our children are going to need therapy mostly because of you.
Lesson learned.
Sorry. I think you're a great dad. Happy Father's Day.
Thanks.
No, you are a great dad. You have really good intentions.
Good intentions. You're fired.
If I wrote your Father's Day card, "Dearest husband, I see that you have really great intentions."
that should be mine.
There should be like a mediocre father section.
Wow.
Not you.
Thank you.
A mediocre father section for cards. Like
the mediocre dad.
You came to that one game.
I think that would sell out.
Yeah.
Wow. Branding idea. The mediocre parent card. You can't do it for moms.
No.
It wouldn't go over
all
well.
Moms are superheroes. We're all right. We're all good.
Nobody's wrong. Yeah. Dads, we're used to it.
We're just not airing my dirty laundry here.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of it.
There's a ton of that. Boom. So much. Well, I guess that was sort of a failed unschooling approach.
Yes. Well, I started with a really great unschooling. So here's the thing.
Mhm.
My kid wants a Spider-Man costume. I don't even know how he knows who Spider-Man is. He has like a Spider-Man book and likes him. He's never really... Has he seen the cartoon?
No.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm looking
not
in your
from
eyes
me.
like
No.
he's never seen the cartoon, right?
No.
I don't
I mean, I don't
understand.
really, Spider-Man's fine.
But
I
it's
mean, it's
super
like,
cool because he knows that he shoots webs from his wrists, even if he's never seen it in live action, whatever. Anyway, we went shopping for curtains yesterday, and he saw a Spider-Man costume, and he was like dead set on getting it. So he wants to earn money. And so I was like, okay, well, let's count the money that you have. Let's sit down and let's do the math. So he pulled out all his money, and I showed him, like, here's how you sort your bills, and here's how you count it. Start with the smallest. No, start with the biggest. And then we were doing math, and it was like a really cool unschooling math lesson, which is also just called parenting.
Yeah.
And teaching your kids. And then he decided he wanted an odd job, and so you gave that to him. So it all started.
Then they got fired. Yeah. That's how things go sometimes. I've been fired.
You have been fired. And it was hilarious because you wanted to quit, honestly.
I did want to quit.
And then he fired you, but it was a friend, and he had promised you that he wouldn't fire you.
It happens.
It was kind of weird.
I talked to him the other night. We're good. But I had a different job lined up, so I was good. I was like, I knew it was coming. It wasn't really my fault.
No, it wasn't. But
Defer
it was
blame. No, it really was a situation where I was put into this
trial.
It was like a trial run but it's hard to explain, but it was the mechanism that was created in this company didn't work, and it was a new thing that they were trying, and I was leading it.
Mm-hmm.
And it fell on me to make sure that it worked, and I tried to explain, like, this isn't gonna work, and 3 months later, we're gonna have to let you go. Thankfully, we had been
Was it on New Year's Day?
were close. We were 1 week into really very crunchy. Hadn't even gone viral yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's how new that was. And I had a new job lined up because I knew that what I was in was not going to work. And I'm like, oh man, they're going to fire me. When he called that morning, I knew. It was like, okay, I'm about to get fired. See you in a minute. And he's like, we got on the chat or whatever. Not chat, but the Zoom. And he's like, hey, we're going to have to let you go. I'm like, I knew this was coming, but it still hurts.
He was your friend. That's the worst part about it to me is he like headhunted you and
sort of
pulled you from a stable job.
Yeah.
And you said, all right, I'm leaving a stable position.
Yeah.
I have a family. What, I just need some assurance that even if this doesn't work out, you'll find a place for me in the company.
Yeah.
He said yes, and then he fired you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I said, talked to him the other day. We're good. Everything's great.
Cool.
I like him. He's a great guy.
Nice.
Yeah. Shouldn't have fired me, but that does bring me. So we're talking about homeschooling, unschooling. Could you kind of give me and the audience, for people who might not know, what is the difference between homeschooling and unschooling? Both are done at home or wherever you are, I guess. What's the difference?
I mean, I'm not an expert. I feel like I need to say that. I am just a homeschooling mom. And to me, the difference is, unschooling is a type of homeschooling.
Okay.
Except it's an approach where you use everyday moments to teach.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of sitting down and using a workbook or some sort of laid out curriculum, you basically just go through life and learn your lessons that way. I think it's really great. It seems like the most practical way to educate and probably the most long standing, that's
What do you mean by that?
through all of time. That's how people learn.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But then in my case, I don't think I'm smart enough to unschool because I don't think I would see all the opportunities for education.
I think you are.
I mean, maybe if I
You're certainly
maybe
smart enough. I don't necessarily know if you're
like creative enough. I am creative in a different way, but just always being on, always looking for an opportunity to teach.
I think you can't have too many irons in the fire if you are unschooling. I could be wrong on that, but you have a lot going on.
And I think it would take a long time. Like it would make your life maybe frustrating at times because you're trying to go to the post office, but you're going to use this as a math lesson or something. Is that okay for the postal worker to be standing there waiting, like as you teach your kids? And I don't know. I just feel like it could be really frustrating.
If
kind
she
of like
has
teaching
5
toddlers.
stamps, how many letters can you send? One of the letters is kind of heavy. So
Stamps
be mindful.
are outrageous these days. I mean, and that would, I don't know.
But
There's so many opportunities for teaching in your everyday life. The problem is, for me, I also think there would be gaps. Like, I'm not just randomly talking about Napoleon in my everyday life, but maybe it's through reading books, too.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call myself an unschooler.
You're kind of taking a hybrid approach. I say you... I teach how to pick up sticks in the art of money management, and then I fire them. But I rehire them.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. So we do take more of a hybrid approach to homeschooling, unschooling.
I do like to use every moment that I can as a teaching opportunity, but I wouldn't say that's my focus. I'm definitely using a prepared curriculum to make sure that I cover all my
Right. So, I mean,
bases.
I do think people would be interested to know what curriculums you use.
Sure. So my kids are very young. One of them is not even really being schooled. I mean,
he's extremely young.
4. Yeah. Well, it depends on who you talk to. And with our first one, I was super gung-ho and started kindergarten when he was 4. And then we finished it. And then I was like, wait, he's way too young to go into first grade. So I did kindergarten again, but with a different program. And then we're just kind of floating. Anyway.
He'll be in kindergarten until he's 10. We're switching. We're just trying to see what program is best.
Yes. I like 5 in a row for literature and science-ish and history. And I mean, they have random stuff in there like architecture, and it's just kind of like rounding out.
Some of those fall into different categories as well. So
for math, I like math with confidence. He's just in first grade math. So I mean, I don't know as it progresses if I'll stay with that program, but right now I really like it. And then for reading, I like Logic of English. So that's what we're doing. I'm like mainly focusing on reading and math and then doing 5 in a row to kind of fill in the gaps. Science, I do random little things, but I also have the Treehouse Schoolhouse Nature Study. I'm not super consistent on doing that. We just spend a lot of time outside and we kind of dig into whatever they're interested in.
Yeah.
So I would say you've had very little input about the homeschooling journey.
See, I run a business.
Rely on me.
I'm running a business. I hire and fire people, mostly 4-year-olds.
So I have done a lot of research though, and I've like swapped back and forth. I thought that I would be totally sold on the Waldorf method. And then I bought a curriculum called Oak Meadow. Just wasn't my style of teaching. My kid wasn't really into it. It felt kind of slow for the approach we had taken previously. And I think that's sort of tricky because in the Waldorf method of education, they're not teaching their kids to read until they're like 7 or 8.
What kind of does it not depend on the kid? Something about if they can touch their ear and grab their earlobe from the other side, they can touch it. They can touch.
Grab your earlobe, reach your arm over your head, like arch over it, and if you can touch your earlobe, you're ready to read.
I'm not ready to read right now. Could be my headphones.
So I didn't do that exercise.
I feel like we're probably butchering a couple of concepts So please forgive us if you listen.
That's not right.
We are also under the philosophy that if you're homeschooling, you have to tailor what you do to your kids. Like,
yeah, every kid is totally different. And
train them up in the way they should go. And, it's like no kid is the same.
I love a lot of elements of the Waldorf education system, but I also don't know everything. I'm not the most studied in classical education or whatever.
We should just send
all
them to
these
the
different...
Waldorf school here in Paducah.
Yeah, totally. What would that be?
It doesn't exist.
Yeah, we don't have any like extra little. That's honestly something. I love home educating my children, but if there were other options out there, I can't say with certainty I wouldn't be interested in checking them out.
Of course.
Like a farm school.
Yeah.
Or, Paducah's just so small, there's not a lot of options.
If anything, as a supplement to what you're doing, or, which is, again, fully in line with tailoring the education experience to your kid.
Mm-hmm.
There is something that I feel pretty passionate about, and it's this caricature of the homeschooled child.
Mm-hmm.
And we see it a lot in the comments whenever we do a homeschool video or something, and so many people say that a homeschooled kid, I can't tell you how many people say homeschool should be illegal, like it is in my country. You get that a lot, because of the socialization, like they don't get socialized well, or the education's not up to par, whatever. But specifically on the socialization part, I have strong opinions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the best socialization is in a classroom full of people the same age as you, learning the exact same thing in the exact same way by the exact same person throughout the entire year without any variety. I'm not saying that education has no variety. I'm not saying the subjects don't have any variety, but we're talking about socialization in particular. You're teaching them to have to navigate relationships and social situations strictly with their peers.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas homeschooling does allow for more interactions with adults, interactions with kids that are much older than them, kids that are much younger than them, on a pretty consistent basis. Now, I understand that 30 years ago, when there were like 2 people per town homeschooling, that it could get a little bit sheltered, I guess is the right
and I
word.
think a lot of people's their main drive for homeschooling was to shelter their children, but that's no longer necessarily the case.
But sheltered might not be the correct word, because I think there's a difference between wanting to protect your kid versus
shelter,
complete sheltering from the world and how the world works. I think you can teach your kid how the world works without them having to be in a system that you have no control over what they learn and what influences they have. I don't think fully sheltered has this negative connotation that they will never understand how the world actually works, when in truth, you can protect your kids.
Them.
You can prepare your kids for how the world works, but on your own terms, and again, in a way that you know your child and what they are ready for and what they're not ready for. I have a lot of problems with people saying that homeschool kids just aren't socialized well enough.
I mean, in a classroom, they're basically telling you to sit down and be quiet. How much socialization is happening there when you're forced to look forward and you can't talk to your neighbor? Honestly.
I mean, that was all of my childhood. Now, okay.
You really struggled. You were kind of a bad kid.
Okay, let's not forget last episode where I was in a trailer double wide for 1 year.
That was just 1 year.
Just to clarify, the lady, with the fire alarm opera voice, that was 1 year. After that, went to regular conventional school, and then went to public school and middle school and high school. So I'm not
You have a variety of school
I
experience.
have a variety of school experience. I've been homeschooled.
But that was also your experience in the school system, is that you had to sit down and be quiet.
Correct.
There are also tons of different kinds of schools. So we're not saying, here's our blanket statement for this episode. We're not saying every school is exactly the same. There are great schools out there.
They can't often be tailored to kids. And I think that's the main problem.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it is a complete myth that homeschoolers are not socialized.
Yeah,
enough.
I mean,
It's in this day and age.
My kids go out with me when we run errands, and they have plenty of interaction with people there, but I'm not saying that's their only interaction either.
We see the mailman every day he comes. We say hi, and that is their interaction. They get plenty of socialization.
No. We have a little Forest Friends group on Fridays, and they get together with their friends there and hang out with them. And then we also have play dates through the week, which is awesome because the playgrounds are totally empty.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about how many lines homeschool kids don't have to stand in.
That's true. In one of the comments that I saw, it said something like kids need to be in school for at least 6 hours, because in a different comment...
6 to 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday.
That's what the comment said?
Yes, kids should be schooling.
But so much of that time is wasted on waiting. Just waiting.
Waiting to go to the bathroom, waiting to get your lunch, waiting for the teacher to call on you, waiting.
Having to listen to Bobby read.
But the detractors would say that, well, you're not teaching your kids patience. Oh, yes, we are.
Mm-hmm.
We teach our kids patience. We make our kids wait when it's necessary to wait. But we don't just make them stand in lines and conform to things that aren't necessary. But then they say, but people say that they're not going to be prepared for the real world.
But they're spending their lives in the real world, not inside school. School isn't the real world because...
Conventional school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, that is like a little bubble. It's totally different than what the real world is.
I guess the point we're trying to make is that we're not saying that there's anything inherently wrong with sending your kids to school.
No.
There's nothing inherently wrong with deciding against homeschooling.
It's just the homeschool caricature, or like the negativity that's associated with homeschool, should be dropped because it's just not accurate.
100%.
But I mean, there are cases. That's the issue. There are cases where people are super awkward, but I think a lot of that doesn't even have to do with them being homeschooled. It probably has to do with their parents are super awkward.
And personality types. Can I tell you how many awkward people I knew in public school? So many. Yeah. Oftentimes I was one. Have you seen the picture of me with a Hawaiian shirt and glasses? I was an awkward kid. I had my friends, but I was awkward, but not as awkward as some of the most awkward. Mm-hmm. I knew people who were more awkward than any homeschooler I've ever met. Mm. So it's not a good take.
What
to
defines
say that's just
awkward these days anyway? Because there are so many different types of kids in homeschool or in public school now that would have been called awkward when we were kids.
Sure.
That aren't necessarily classified as awkward anymore.
I guess. I don't know. I hope it is coming across that we're not coming against public school in this particular conversation. We're more so trying to say, get off the homeschoolers' back. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many comments say homeschool should be illegal. Homeschoolers they should not exist. It's illegal in my country. I know I just said that, but it's like it comes up every time we talk about homeschooling. And it's just like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. You have no idea what you're talking about.
And I feel like I keep doing this, but there are people who abuse the system. There are people who don't actually school
and
their
there
kids.
Are really cruddy public schools.
I know.
There are really bad teachers.
Let's talk about chemistry.
There's
when
really
I was in
great
high school,
teachers.
My chemistry teacher was going through a divorce and she was super depressed. And so every day she was just like, get a coloring sheet.
In chemistry class.
Yeah. That is what we did. There were tests that we had to take on memorizing the periodic table of elements. I probably cheated.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I was.
Well, when your teacher's not even looking.
Well, when your teacher's not even teaching.
Yeah.
And I guess I just didn't have motivation to go home and study. But I passed, and then I move on and I go to college and I'm totally lost in college chemistry.
Right. I do think that if we're talking about advantages versus disadvantages, I think disadvantage, and this is from my own personal experience in high school, well, middle school, high school, all of it really, going through public school. The disadvantage is having a person like me there, where all you're trying to do is get by. Classes, classroom structure, being surrounded by kids, having one teacher in a 30-kid room classroom, is not how I learn. Studying a book about a subject I'm not interested in without any kind of practical application is not how I learn. And so my entire school existence, including college, was about how can I pass? What is the least amount of work I have to do in order to pass the test so I can move on to the next thing so I can get the heck out of here?
You were one of those kids. Oh, he's just not using his full potential. He's not applying himself.
I wasn't, because you know what I was doing?
Joking around.
Well, I was joking around, but I was also like, I'm reading books that I'm interested in. I'm writing fiction.
True, you did. I'm write a lot in college. Well, and come up with stories.
But I'm doing things. I'm learning video stuff. I'm goofing around. But like, yes, it didn't work for me. And what I was trying to do, my entire existence, didn't realize it until pretty much this moment. My entire school existence was trying to do what I was interested in and what I was good at. And I never had the opportunity to. During
to
school.
Pursue those interests.
And I'm not saying that those pursuits don't exist in school now. They do way more so different now than they used to. But man, I had no way to pursue what I was good at.
Well, and it's kind of unfortunate. We live in Western Kentucky where the schooling options are not widely varied.
No.
There aren't necessarily schools that would give you opportunities to pursue your interests because we don't have the funding. We don't have enough people interested.
Yeah.
And so what does that do? That only leaves us with the option to homeschool. And I've said it before, I feel like if our kids were put in school, they would be the bad kids because they're just little boys. They're little boys who need to play.
Right.
Who need to get outside and dig and burn energy and be silly and goof off. Like, we only school for maybe 2 hours a day. And that's really pushing it for them. Yeah. It's not that they don't have a good
attention span.
Because,
they do when they're interested in something.
Sit there and listen to us read for hours and hours if it's a story they like.
Oh yeah. Or a subject they're interested in.
Yeah. But just like general math or like we got to do this because we're trying to advance, we got to like make our way through this curriculum. It's pushing it.
Right.
To be schooling for 2 hours.
Yeah. Well, I actually have a comment on that from YouTube if you're interested. I don't have the username on it, but it says school should not be, this is perfect, school should not be 2 hours and a half. Your kids are not going to be employable. School should be 5 to 6. I forgot that we had already said this. School should be 5 to 6 hours Monday through Friday. And they are actually talking about our 4 and 6-year-old Oaks and Alder because they're referencing the video that we made. And can you imagine putting Oaks or Alder through 5 to 6 hours of structured schooling per day?
That's what I'm saying. They would be the bad kids. They would always be in trouble. They would.
Just like their dad.
Wild and silly. And they weren't meant, their personality, at least, wasn't meant to be sitting at a desk or in a super structured environment.
The other comment is no one going to mention the fact that they only do 1 to 2 hours of school a day? Question mark, question mark, question mark. It's like...
You can get a lot done when you're not having to take bathroom breaks and you're not having to go to a different classroom.
Or talk to a bunch of different kids.
Mm-hmm. Here's the question. What do blue and red make when you mix them? Purple. Like, you don't have to wait for kids to raise their hand and answer. And I've never even asked that question.
Sally.
I've never even asked that question.
I thought it was brown. You're wrong, Billy.
I think you're being a little dramatic there.
Okay, let's just insert. You're wrong, Jason. I thought it was brown.
That actually reminds me of this really funny situation. My dad was asking our 6-year-old a joke. He said, "What's black and white and red all over?" And our 6-year-old said, "I don't know, brown."
I feel like
so genius.
I feel like that's the most intelligent answer to that question.
I know. so
hilarious.
Literal.
And then that's probably why they were picking up all the tiny sticks when I said go pick up all the sticks in the yard, and then they got fired. Well, I have an interesting article that I got from the Washington Post, which I think is about a year old. It's called Homeschooling's Rise from Fringe to Fastest Growing Form of Education. And I'm just going to read segments of it, but I think some of this might surprise you. Homeschooling has become, by a wide margin, America's fastest growing form of education. The analysis, based on data the Post collected for thousands of school districts across the country, reveals that a dramatic rise in homeschooling at the onset of the pandemic has largely sustained itself through the 2022-2023 academic year, defying predictions that most families would return to schools that have dispensed with mask mandates and other COVID restrictions. Percentage increase in homeschooling since the 2017-2018 year. Here are some standouts. Tennessee is up 77%.
Wow.
Kentucky's up 56%. California, which has pretty tight restrictions from what I understand, up 78%.
Mm-hmm.
New York, 103% rise. And in Washington, D.C., 108% rise in homeschooling.
Wow. I mean, in those big cities, there are endless opportunities for learning.
Yeah.
Think of all the museums you could go to.
And it's oftentimes either free or discounted for
so cool
groups and stuff.
Yeah. Definitely. So I was saying earlier, like, if there were other options, then maybe I would explore those. But I don't know. If you live in a big city, you have so much at your fingertips.
But you're limited on the
tools.
What you can, just
do in a day.
Kinda.
Yeah.
Or just digging in the dirt.
Yep.
Going out and playing by yourself.
I've only ever had a yard. And I've never, I don't even know what that looks like to not have a yard.
Yeah, like in a state.
Because I never, thought about that.
In a state like Kentucky, there's not a place, there's very few places to even rent that don't have yard space.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to a place like New York or D.C. where,
yeah,
there's just, there's
no
parks, but
yeah.
you can't just go out and play.
Mm-hmm.
Not really.
Mm-hmm.
Go out and play in Central Park.
That would be a different level of challenge. But then, like I said, there's so much more to do.
I've always wanted to try the city life with the kids. We're not going to, I don't think. But it would be an interesting flip.
This goes against my crunchy convictions, but I'm too much of a germaphobe to live in the city with children. I think I would just constantly be like, don't put your hand in your mouth. Don't stop picking your nose. Keep the fingers out of the orifices, please.
Oh gosh.
But in Kentucky, in Western Kentucky, there's not much.
Yeah. Well, most of it's from your own
yard. That's what I'm saying. It would feel very different. I think I would feel a little hyper about it.
Yeah, you get used to it. The end of the article, somewhere around there, says, this is interesting. Homeschooling's surging popularity crosses every measurable line of politics, geography, and demographics. The number of homeschooled kids has increased 373% over the past 6 years in the small city of Anderson, South Carolina. it has also increased 358% in the school district in the Bronx. So it's just it's showing that it's just everywhere.
And it's
There's a
becoming
big
more and more
rise.
popular.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is really interesting. But I think part of it is because in COVID, kids were doing school from home, and it probably wasn't as effective. I mean, I talked to a public school teacher here and said, have you noticed gaps in kids because of the whole COVID thing where they had to stay home? And she was like, oh, yeah, there are definitely gaps that we've had to work through because you just can't teach everything in that way from home.
Okay.
Parents weren't taking on the job as educators. They were as supervisors. But
they were still, because they were still learning, a lot of them, and I'm not, again, I don't know about everybody, but they were still going to school, but online for the most part, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't work that way.
Not as well, no. And you're saying that a lot of these, and I guess this article points that out too, that a lot of these people chose to just become home educators rather than doing the online school, essentially.
Yeah. And I feel bad for teachers who had to go through that. I mean, that had to be awful, just so stressful and the worst. And I think I do feel bad for teachers because they have so many children without the resources they need, without the support they need. I mean, I have 2 kids and I struggle.
Yeah.
And they're my own kids.
Well, you can always fire your own kids.
True, you can't fire kids.
Can't fire other kids.
Can't fire other
Get in
people.
trouble with that. You get in trouble when it's your own kids too.
I know.
Oh, if I were a teacher?
Yeah. With our own kids, the way you fired them today.
Would you fire me if I was the teacher, the primary teacher?
Oh, yeah. If I was the principal, you'd be fired for sure for firing kids.
Okay, there's another aspect of this that I would like to cover that we've talked about in the money episode, but I kind of want to hit on it again because it comes up every time we talk about homeschooling, and that's homeschooling is a very privileged way of life. And I'm not going to say that in some cases that can be true. And I understand.
That is true. I mean, it is. I mean, to some degree,
but
it is
but it's not a blanket statement that you can just make and then be okay with that being your just final statement. Homeschool is a privilege. And like there's so many parents that both parents have to work. And my point is that there are so many people who have this feeling that they want to homeschool, but they also don't want to homeschool, and they will make excuses to not homeschool. And one of those excuses will be, we both have to work. And while they're making their expensive car payments, living in a house that doesn't have to be as big as it is, or whatever, name your thing, people can make sacrifices to homeschool if it's something that they truly want to do. You're not
saying that you should if you don't feel called.
I'm not trying to guilt anybody into homeschooling. But
don't always use that as an excuse.
But you shouldn't. If you truly feel like you want to homeschool, most of the time, I would say a lot of times, you can probably make it happen if you're willing to make sacrifices. That is not the case for everybody. I fully understand that. There are plenty of circumstances.
Especially single parent households. How that is a just tricky situation.
Of course it's tricky. Nobody's saying that it, and I'm not saying that it's not true. But people make this blanket statement that if you homeschool, well, then you just have this, elitist, rich life that allows you to do that. And that's not true. We know a lot of families that sacrifice a lot to homeschool. And they do it because they feel like that is what's right for their family. And to call those people privileged or elitist or classist or whatever is very hurtful, because they sacrifice a lot to be able to do what they're doing because they truly believe in it. And that really irks me. Sorry, go ahead.
No, Jason, you are highly passionate about this conversation today.
Well, because we get accused of making blanket statements all the time, and we're elitist or something like that because we have stances on homeschool. We like that approach, but people feel like they can't do it because they want to Well, the truth is, in a lot of cases, not all cases, some cases, you don't have to live the way you do if you really wanted to homeschool.
Sure. Yes, people don't always see the sacrifices that are being made. They don't see the sacrifice of time and the ability to get things done and have a clean house. Maybe that's just me. And then also just like not driving a brand new car, not going out to eat all the time, not going on vacation, I'm just thinking of things that we've sacrificed in the past because
we decided that it was the best. We decided that it was the best move for our family, for me to work and for you to stay at home with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, I now forced you into a job.
Worked yourself out of one and worked me into it.
Worked you into it. Sorry, that was an accident. But, I mean...
It's been great.
It's been good.
Yeah. Really Very Crunchy has made homeschooling a challenge. I see parents who work homeschooling their children. It is just it's tricky to navigate that. But it can be done.
Yeah.
I've even heard of people who homeschool and have full-time jobs when they, if the parent's schedule overlaps, one works nights, one works days.
That's incredibly hard.
And then they just school in the evening.
That's so hard.
I know.
That's got to be exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Hats off to people who do that. That's amazing.
We never really thought we would homeschool our children.
It was never a thought.
No. My younger brothers were homeschooled and I was not homeschooled. And I don't think they really flourished in homeschooling. They definitely liked public schooling better. And I think I was just exposed to that and I saw that in them. And so I thought, well, I definitely don't plan on homeschooling. So.
Well, and I homeschooled
you hated
for
it.
a couple of years when I was young and in middle school. My mom pulled me out of middle school because
you were a troublemaker.
Doing so poorly and she wanted to homeschool me. At the same time, it was not like it is now. We didn't go to things. We didn't have homeschool groups that I was a part of. I didn't make friends that were homeschooled. My mom homeschooled me and I was by myself with my parents. So I definitely wasn't looking to be in the homeschool realm.
What do you think triggered that for us? What do you think was because I didn't just make this decision. I mean, I did make the decision whenever the kids were little. I asked if I could stay home with them, basically, or maybe we just kind of assumed that I would because I couldn't get a job that paid enough to justify sending our kids to a daycare or something.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it was basically probably an even trade.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give you an example of a reason, and I think a lot of people could probably resonate with this. Not long before we had our first child, right here in our county, an art teacher allowed students to do an art project. I suppose facilitated this art project to where they put out an American flag and for people to walk on like a rug. And it as I don't know whether just simply disrespect or to protest or whatever, but if I want to send my kid to school and be in an art class,
why aren't they teaching charcoal?
I want to
that's a weird thing.
Where's pastel drawings, paintings? Where's
why are they rolling out an American flag to step on? The very institution that's paying that teacher.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of weird.
I know. And again, from memory, I don't think it was like the teacher's idea necessarily, but it's
but a teacher should be the one fostering the class to learn in a positive way, and not just blatantly disrespectful.
And that's very much a college student led sort of thing that should be independent and not facilitated in a high school, because in high school, you're still learning the basics of things. You're still a child.
Mm-hmm.
You're still a child.
Mm-hmm.
And to facilitate things like that, and that's just one thing that many parents across the United States are dealing with in school systems that they can't control. They can complain about it. They can take it to the school board and complain about it. They can and get people in trouble, and that's fine, but the damage is done.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that our kids should not be exposed to things of that nature in a way that, I mean, protests happen, and we need to understand it, but I'm not so sure that and I don't know what grade, but I'm not so sure a freshman level art class is fully capable of understanding what they're doing. If I was in high school and was shown that, whether I'd fall on whatever side I would have fallen on, I wouldn't have understood it very well to a degree that I need to be able. My mental capacity wasn't in a state where I was ready for that kind of thing. And maybe you have students who are ready for that kind of subject, but not all of them are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
and then
not
you like set them up for a certain pattern in their life.
right.
That isn't necessarily productive or helpful or
And against the wishes of their parents, of the people who are still children.
Mm-hmm.
This is different than college. In college, you let your kids go.
Mm-hmm.
And those things.
Your job as a parent is to prepare them to meet the real world.
Right.
Not to just send them out into the real world to figure it out when they're still children.
And if you're sending your kids to school, your hope is that it is also preparing your kids for the real world, and not necessarily bringing the real world to them.
Yeah, and there have just been so many times that failures happened, and it's out of your control.
Yeah. And that's just an example that I feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I have a friend who takes her kid to public school, and she is terrified of school shootings. I mean, she thinks about it every time she takes her kid to school.
That's terrifying.
That's a sad reality.
That is a very sad reality that we live in. Yeah. I feel bad for just having that anxiety.
This year had a scare. There was somebody running down the road with an automatic weapon on school grounds. They weren't going to...
I didn't know about that.
They weren't going to the school. Mm-hmm. It was just spotted that this person had a weapon near the school. And so then they locked down the school. And that has to be horrifying as a parent.
He was just going to his deer feeding spot.
I don't know what he was doing. But I don't understand it. Just things have happened.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I get it. It's hard.
I don't think you have to be an expert to homeschool. That's another trap that moms fall into, is that they haven't studied about Charlotte Mason. They haven't read For the Child's Sake or whatever.
I mean, there's definitely time to learn as you go.
Definitely. In the early years, I think anyone could homeschool.
You're going to find your stride.
Definitely. And you can always get help. There are so many programs to support homeschooling parents. And then also, one thing I really look forward to is actually sending my kids to the community college when they're in high school, probably.
Get some college
credit. I know a lot of the homeschool kids in our area graduate high school with an associate's degree.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah. And I think in some places, I know in Tennessee it's free, and I think
here it's free.
Here it is for your associates, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of places are doing that now. It's a really great way to have a leg up right out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, everybody's trying to do what's right by their kids, except for those few of you who aren't. And if you aren't,
shame on you.
What are you doing? Get it together.
Firing your children?
You're fired. I hired him back. He's fine. But on probation. He's on probation. Yeah, for the next 2 weeks. He knows it. So he better stay in line or he's out of here.
What I love about homeschooling is that it's so flexible and customizable and can really nourish and feed your children in a way that helps them grow at the pace that they need.
As long as you don't mind that they're not ready for the real world, according to everybody on the comments on YouTube.
We'll have to prove them wrong. I have this fear, just like I mentioned in a different episode, that I'm going to get like some crazy disease because I'm the crunchy mom. And it's like, she would. Like my kids are going to be total bums because I've made all these videos about homeschooling, and then they're just going to stay home. They're just going to stay home and never pursue anything and still be sleeping in our bed.
I will not let that happen. So there's no fear of that.
There's just one person out there waiting with bated breath for Oaks to turn 18 to see what's going to happen.
Oh, they've said as much.
I know.
Over and over and over. There's more than one. More than one, I guarantee.
Waiting to see.
Oh, yeah.
We're totally going to be like canceled by then, and then they're going to have to do some deep digging.
This is probably
whatever
the
happened
episode.
to the really very crunchy kids.
They changed their names and moved to Alaska. After this episode, we might have to.
Yep. Thank you so much for listening to the Really Very Crunchy podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure you leave a review and check out our description or show notes to see links to more from us.